Okay, I do hope I'm on air because we seem to be having some technical problems again. But nothing to be upset about. Welcome to the program. Tuloy po kayo. Maraming salamat for joining us today. I wish you a great day, a great week ahead. And para sa tatay kong namayapa na, my dear father, Louis Beltran, happy birthday in heaven. Say, na hindi natin nakakalimutan. April 4 is the birthday of my dad, Louis Beltran, who passed away in 1994. It's been a while, but nonetheless, we remember him, and yours truly would not be where he is if it had not been for my father. And so let's go on. April 4, 2022. It's a Monday. Welcome to the program agenda. Thank you for joining us this morning. Thank you for being subscribers of Cignal TV channels 8 and 250 for One News. And for those of you who are not yet subscribers, thank you for joining us via facebook.com/OneNewsPH and YouTube. Today, we begin the day with our lineup, and please, listen, because we invited a special guest. He's been on the show before to teach us or at least give us a better understanding ano ba ang ating kinahaharap o hinaharap with the 12.03 trillion pesos bill. Tit lang, 12 point something trillion pesos na utang. The Philippine government as of January, or the Filipino people, hindi government, the Filipino people has a debt, okay, pagkakautang of 12 trillion pesos plus or minus. And the question is, what will be the effect of that to you, to me, to your children, and to your grandchildren? Because many countries who have been in this situation have learned, and even the Philippines, back in right after the Marcos regime, we continued to pay for international debts, local and foreign debts that were incurred by the Marcos dictatorship, and we continued to pay it years after they were removed from office. So anyway, pag-aaralan po natin yan, and to teach us about that will be a economist and Professor Emmanuel Leyco. After Professor Leyco gives us his lecture on tax, economy, and economics and international debt, we will shift to my favorite hospital. I was just thinking about this yesterday when a friend of mine who lives in the Valle Verde County, dito po sa may bandang Ortigas, told me that her mother was in the hospital. And understandably, we bring our loved ones or ourselves to the nearest hospital. So kung kayo po ay nandun sa lugar na kung ang pinakamalapit na hospital ay mahal, pasensyahan na lang po, di ba? In my case, my favorite hospital is the Rizal Medical Hospital here, very near Barrio Capitolio, and we're going to feature it because sabi ko nga, mabuti nang makakamusta ang Rizal Medical Center because it is a hospital that I have seen vastly improve over the years, as in miraculous improvement po, kasi from a hospital that only the poorest of the poor would have second thoughts of going kasi napaka-liit, napabayaan through the years, mga budget shorts. Pero ngayon po, ako po, gusto ko nang magpa-reserve ng kwarto doon for the future. Anyway, before all of that, let's go to our daily starter. And this is from the blog of young lady Shihori Obata. And our beginning for the daily starter for the week, nothing changes if nothing changes. Walang magbabago kung walang pagbabago. Okay, kung tatagalugin natin yan. And it is a good reminder for all of you, especially those of you who want change but won't change. Kumbaga, ika nga gusto mong pumayat, baguhin mo yung dieta mo. Gusto mong gumanda, gumwapo, ayusin mo yung itsura mo. Nothing changes if nothing changes. Okay. Meanwhile, let's go to the front page of the Philippine Star. And April 4, 2022, it's a Monday. The headline is COMELEC ICE Task Force versus Fake News. Okay. The Commission on Election is planning to put up a task force to monitor fake news, election-related fake news kasi marami po na naman yung mga mga former Cambridge Analytica, yung mga kung ano-anong grupo, etc. Pinagbibintangan na naman. Okay, anyway, let's see. Okay, we will see what else will happen. But in the meantime, that's the headline. And at the top of the front page, DOH wants vaccination during Holy Week. Marami naman po kasi sa inyo, tatambay lang, mag-aayuno lang, or will just be at home. The DOH is thinking of declaring that also as vaccination week. And please, we encourage everyone, magpabakuna na po kayo. Make it your sacrifice. The little inconvenience of going to wherever the vaccination will happen, make it your sacrifice for love of yourself, love of your country. Remember, your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit. Baka kanyo pinababayaan ninyo yung pagbabakuna, biglang managot kayo kay Lord. Delivery of national ID is being fast-tracked by the Philippine Statistics Authority throughout the country. Minamadali na through the Philippine Postal Service because it would be very useful during the election if we have the Philippine national ID available for cross-checking. Meanwhile, that photograph at the very top of the front page, you have a photo of Muslims gathering for the afternoon prayers at the Manila Golden Mosque because they are now observing Ramadan. Okay, it is their period of fasting and cleansing. And we wish all of our Muslim brothers well and the discipline during this season. Meanwhile, the United Nations Rights Panel adopts resolution versus fake news. So fake news pa rin ang mga nagiging issue, whether it's the COMELEC, the United Nations Human Rights Commission, and in Taal, and on Taal Island, 17 quakes were registered in 24 hours. Meanwhile, the Philippines must produce more ship captains, engineers, according to national scientist Emil Javier. Yan po, matagal na pong pinangangalandakan niya, sinasabi yan, pinopromote yan ng kung sino-sino, mga opisyal, personalities, that we must upgrade our quality of workers from menial workers, domestic helpers, and ship whatever going captains, engineers. Okay, DILG index crimes up under alert level 1. Tumaas daw po ang mga nangyayaring mga krimen under alert level 1 primarily because people get to wonder, wala ng curfew, etc., etc. Meanwhile, that center photo, a church worker drapes a violet shroud on the statue of the Immaculate Conception, Cathedral of Cubao. And the statue of Jesus Christ, okay? At the Immaculate, okay, Conception Cathedral in Cubao because of the Lenten season. Tinatago muna si Kristo Okay, NBI wraps up Smartmatic hacking probe, but the results will come out only in the next couple of weeks or maybe after Holy Week na. Meanwhile, presidential bets all agree government is powerless against political dynasties. Okay, ayan na po. So those are the front page news of today's Philippine Star. Let's now go to our first interview, or actually hindi po interview. Our first lecture for today will be from the eminent professor of economics, Pamantasan Lungsod ng Maynila, President Professor Emmanuel Leyco. Prof, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Sir Cito, and thank you for inviting me back.
Ay, lagi naman kasi you have a very clear way of presenting things. Issue shortcut ko na, Professor, no? When I saw that the country's foreign debt or total debt amounted to 12 trillion pesos, first, I was shocked. Second, I couldn't believe it. And third, I was wondering, saan napunta yun? Saan ginastos yun? And most important, the fourth concern is, how will this impact Filipinos? Kasi ang dami ako nadidinig na bagamat we dismiss or we don't want to think about utang, we all end up paying for the utang of governments one way or another. Professor, go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you, Sir Cito. First, let us start with why do we borrow? Borrowing is not bad per se. It's not bad. It's only bad when you cannot pay. When the decision to borrow or use your own money comes, there are a number of considerations we have to make. First, the cost of money. Is it cheaper to use other people's money or use your own money? But in the case of the Philippine government, this is not exactly the micro decision that we make, like you and I make, or corporations make. They can borrow when the interest rate is low, and therefore it is cheaper for them to use other people's money. But in the case of the Philippine government and other governments for that matter, do they have the money to spend for the requirements of governing a country? And in the case of the Philippines, I understand that we had to borrow because of the pandemic. We needed to buy the vaccines. We needed to spend for the healthcare facilities and so forth. However, when we make those decisions, we also need to make a choice. Do we continue our projects, our infrastructure projects, or do we now turn to healthcare? But in the case of the Philippines, that was not the case. We continued with our high-priced infrastructure project, and we also needed to spend for the COVID vaccines. And as you would remember, in 2020, we were one of the last few countries who were able to get access to the vaccine. So we needed to borrow to pay for that. Now, the problem is, can the government afford to pay the debt service? Now, we are reminded of what happened in the 1980s when the Philippine government had to appeal to our creditors that we cannot pay, and therefore we needed to suspend debt service payment. That's the terrible thing. That's the most terrible, the worst thing that you can do is when you come to the borrower's market, to the capital market, and tell them, I can no longer pay. Because you will be marked for a very, very long time. And that will also create disruption in the financial markets. They also found out that the Philippine government, if you recall, Bangko Sentral is not Bangko Sentral in those days. It was the Central Bank of the Philippines. And they were found to have inaccurate numbers. And therefore, the IMF, the World Bank, the international creditors, the bank syndicates came down on the Philippines and said, we cannot lend you any more money until you do your own housekeeping. So where are we right now? The Philippines is not exactly where we were in 1980s. The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas is a much better than what we had before the Central Bank of the Philippines in terms of managing the financial system. The Bangko Sentral and our financial system, the banking system, relatively is a very conservative financial system in terms of the reserve requirement that they put up, in terms of the discipline that the Bangko Sentral instills on our banking community. The community is a very good community right now. Now, the 12 trillion pesos that we owe the creditors, not all of them are government debt. We also have private sector banks who borrow abroad. And they also issue bonds, they also issue bilateral debts and so forth. What is the problem now? The problem is the government borrowed, I think they already exceeded the usual 60% benchmark to GDP. So the international community will be looking at the Philippines as now treading on the debt service comes. Why is 60% important? 60% is important because the borrowing capability, the borrowing capacity of an institution is measured against its capability to earn money. Just like you and me, nobody will give us loans that the banks think we cannot pay. And that
kailangan may capacity to pay.
Yes, the capability, capability to pay. So, yung 60% of our GDP has been exceeded. So they'll say, well, there are countries who have exceeded 60%. For example, the U.S. government. The U.S. government has far exceeded the 60% debt borrowing capacity or ratio. So what is the difference between the Philippine economy and the U.S. economy? The U.S. economy, they are the ones who print U.S. dollars. The Philippine government, or the borrowers from the Philippines, we buy U.S. dollars with our Philippine peso. So if our economy is weak and therefore we cannot pay, we cannot buy dollars, we are in trouble. So it is not fair to say that, look, the Philippines is only about 60-65%. The U.S. already has 100% or more. That is not a fair comparison. So where do we become vulnerable? We become vulnerable when the government is not able to collect enough taxes to pay debt service. We are vulnerable when the economy becomes so weak that the GDP slows down again. Remember, the GDP has not gone back to the pre-pandemic levels. We are growing, but we lost 16.5% in one quarter. So right now, for us to be able to go back to the 2019 pandemic levels, we need to double up our GDP growth rate right now. So that's where we are. People are concerned, like you and I think we are now talking, how much is too much? How much can we carry in debt to be able to pay?
Okay, Professor, nandiyan na yan eh. We already owe 12 trillion pesos and as you pointed out, we will have to find money or a means to pay. Now, from what I have been picking up, studying, or discovering, is that as those payments are to be made, there are conditions that are imposed by the IMF, by the ADB, by other countries na sinasabing, you know, you're okay with us as long as you guarantee that X% of taxes will be dedicated to debt servicing and that you must impose more taxes, bawal ang mga wage increases, etc. Could you just give us a sampling of what will directly be affecting ordinary Filipinos like you and me? Kumbaga, yung sinabi nila, ay nako, halikan muna yung mga panaginip mong magkakaroon ka ng promotion.
Okay. Mandatory ang debt service sa atin. No? As a result of our experience in the 1980s, nagkaroon ng law na kailangan mandatory ang ating debt service. Before anything else, no, bayad utang muna tayo. So, what would be sacrificed or compromised because of that mandatory debt service? We have to make sure that debt service is earmarked. We will now dig into social services, the other components of our government budget. May mga mandatory, hindi naman natin pwedeng itigil yung pagbabayad ng sweldo ng ating mga empleyado. So, kailangan meron tayong pangsweldo, meron tayong kailangang pambayad doon sa mga services na kinukuha ng gobyerno. So, ang magsasuffer dito will be the social services. So, DSWD, DepEd, no, Department of Health, they could be the more potentially the vulnerable components of our budget.
But why is that, Professor? Because ako, in my column, I have been nagging the powers that be na magtipid ang gobyerno you know, yung sinasabi mong infrastructure. While I know it's necessary that we should build roads, bridges, etc., we live in a country, matinong-matino yung kalsada, binabakbak. So, you know, I think people would be inclined to say, tigilan nga muna or cut the DPWH budget in half. Marami namang private sector like San Miguel are building airports. So why is the government even spending its own money and borrowing money when private sector are willing to spend for it, etc.? Kasi parang bakit education, bakit healthcare, and bakit DSWD ang babawasan at hindi yung mga congressman, yung kanilang mga libreng gasolina, etc.?
Of course, ang legislators din natin ang nag-i-earmark, ang gumagawa ng ating budget taon-taon. No? So, I think we have to convince the legislators na magkaroon tayo ng public finance agenda. No? I think this is what is also missing during this presidential debate, no, presidential elections, no, yung mga issue ng fiscal policy natin, paano natin iaayos ang ating spending kung wala naman tayong priorities, wala tayong development agenda, ano uunahin natin, ano ang ating ihuhuli, ano ang pwede natin i-defer. Pero kung lahat ay priority, labo-labo. So, right now, Sir Cito, wala pa tayong problema sa pagbabayad. Kasi most of the debt are mid-term and long-term. So ngayong taon na to, wala pa tayong problema. Next year, baka mararamdaman na natin, no? Pero unti-unti na yan. At depende rin dun sa takbo ng ating ekonomiya. Depende rin dun sa palitan ng dolyar at ng piso. Pagka bumagsak ang piso, wala tayong ginagawa pero lumaki ang utang natin. Those are the risks, no?
Okay.
And risk of payment, no, also will be characterized by other risks. There's a foreign currency risk kasi our debt are in dollars, so we have to buy in dollars. Do we have enough dollar reserve? Our dollar reserve has been coming down. Do we have enough dollar remittances coming in? we do have a lot of dollar remittances from our OFW brothers and sisters coming in. More than $2 billion a month. Malaki yun, no? And the multiplier effect ng $2 billion, a lot. No? So they probably spend $6 billion every month, and the $2 can easily pay for that. However, if we continue to drag our economy down, no matter how strong the dollar remittances are coming in, if they are being used, remember, we are a net importer. So we continue to import using OFW money. That means that whatever was sent here immediately goes out of the country. So parang nakikita mo dito na the money is flowing in, but the following day or in the same day it goes out. No? So it is important right now, I think, for the Philippine government and the new leaders, in a few months, who will take over the realm of leading the country. This is a serious matter, a very, very serious.
Okay. What advice, unsolicited advice, would you dare to give the incoming administration, regardless of who they are? Because people keep saying, it's going to be the economy that's going to be the biggest challenge. But back then, we did not have the Ukraine-Russian war. This issue about fuel was just beginning to happen, etc., etc. What are the biggest concerns, should be the biggest concern, and what advice can you give the incoming administration to do?
Regardless of who comes in, I think the economic agenda should be on top. And in the short term, I think we already need to plug the holes in our budget. Every year, there are billions of pesos that are unspent, which means that the budgeting the previous year was not realistic, was not up to par with the capability, the absorptive capacity of the Philippine bureaucracy, and therefore, pwede naman siguro come June, magkaroon tayo ng economic summit. And let us start looking at the next 6 months of the year. Ano ang pwede nating baguhin ngayon? But of course, you need to convene the legislators and then come up with your economic agenda for the next half of the year. And then start with, ano ba ang ating development agenda? How do we push for the development of our country, considering that in the last 2 years, our economy really was in the pits, although we are trying to get back. And I think we are showing some indications that we are on the way to recovery. And then came Ukraine, and then came the oil price hike. So what do we do? Para tayong everyday we are fighting fires that are showing up in different places. So,
Professor, Professor, uso pa ba yung mga solutions na, kasi I remember, pasensya ka na, mas magaling ka sa akin sa economics yung Reaganomics, yung panahon ni Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was talking about balanced budget. Reagan was talking about, an economy that fends for itself, that was nationalistic in a sense. Noong panahon na nagbabayad tayo ng utang, when we were paying debts or we were struggling, I remember importation was really very strictly supervised. Kumbaga, hindi ka basta-basta anything that involved the use of foreign currency, talagang hinigpitan ng mga nasa central bank, nasa customs, etc. Uso pa ba yung mga ganon?
Under this current environment, kasi ito, mukhang hindi na natin pwedeng gawin yan. We cannot stop global trade. Kasama na nga tayo dun sa mga trading relations. Pumipirma na tayo. Hindi pwede natin sabihin na we are not going to import from you, we are not going to sell to you anymore. This is an open economic border already, no? So what do we need to do? We cannot even compare our economy or our budget, our economics with that of the US na pagka sinabi nila Reaganomics, let the supply side take over and then ganito ganyan. Hindi eh. Hindi ganun kakongkreto yung ating economy. So what do we need to do is to strengthen, no, and be more focused. We need to have a social development agenda. No, hindi naman pwedeng bayad utang lang tayo tapos yung mga nagbabayad nakalimutan na natin. I think we need to make sure that our budget is tight, but at the same time we are not losing sight of the social responsibilities of our government. Huwag niyong bawasan ang ating healthcare budget. Huwag bawasan ang ating education. Remember, coming from education, I can see this 24 hours a day. The biggest casualty of the pandemic, I believe, is the education sector. Why do I say that? Can you imagine taking online classes for 2 years? Kung ikaw ay doktor, you cannot face the patients tomorrow without having face the patients during your student days. The nurses, the therapists, no? At ito pa, kung ikaw ay inhinyero, lalo na mga structural engineers, and for 2 years we've been graduating engineers and architects, doctors, nurses, and therapists. No? These are skills-based professions. Can you imagine kung ang ating inhinyero hindi sila nakapag-laboratorio to test the strength of materials, baka mga mga bridges natin nakatagilid.
Professor, nangyayari na nga yan kuminsan pati building. Anyway, I don't want to be pessimistic at the start of the week. So you are saying let us not sacrifice social services, but we also need to do debt service. What about in priority investment? Because right now people are talking agriculture, which they often do, agriculture and education. Pagdating naman ng pag naupo na, kinakalimutan na. What is the primary industry or sector that the next administration must invest in, and what is the risk of not doing so? My last question.
Food security, Cito. We cannot continue to import. Remember, the rice and agricultural products overseas are cheaper because their government has much bigger support, subsidies to their farmers. Pero sa atin, halos wala tayong subsidy. And this will be the undoing of our society. Kung lahat ay ating ini-import, nawawala yung ating mga industriya, nawawala ang ating agriculture. So, rice is cheaper abroad, so we import it. Bagsak ang ating mga farmers. No? So, ngayon, wala tayong pambili o kaya tumaas ang presyo dahil bagsak ang palitan ng dolyar at ng piso. Ngayon nakikita natin, ang ating food security, ang ating access to our rice, our fish. Remember, even galunggong daw ay atin ang ni-import.
Well, nakakatakot yung sinasabi mo, Professor. Kasi alam mo, biglang naalala ko yung pre-Marcos period and the early Marcos period. Yung pag nagutom ang magsasaka, aakyat sa bundok. Pag nagutom ang mangingisda, aakyat sa bundok. Eto na naman tayo, the vicious circle. Anyway, may pahabol lang, Professor, from our news desk. How ideal is the current debt to GDP ratio of 61%?
That is not ideal. Siguro with the kind of vulnerability that our economy is going through, siguro hanggang 50% lang dapat. Minaximize natin yung threshold na 60% of our GDP dapat ang ating utang. Pero sa atin, given the pandemic, I think we have to be more conservative. Wag 60%. And in fact, right now, makikita na natin yan. Paano mo mababayaran ang 12 trillion in economy na ngayon pa lang uli bumabangon at saka ang dolyar natin at ang piso sa palitan na ito ay pabagsak, no? Ang piso ngayon nasa 52 yata, no? Depende kung ano nangyayari. So I would stay on the more conservative side, on the safe side, na wag nating i-exceed, no, ang 60%. In fact, ibaba pa natin.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Leyco. Again, very clear and very educational and informative.
Maraming salamat, Cito, and good morning to you and happy birthday in heaven to your dad.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor. That's our first guest for today, Professor Emmanuel Leyco, economist, pamantasan ng lungsod ng Maynila President, and regular here on Agenda. Yun po, nadinig nyo ang sinabi ni Professor Leyco, we should not make comparisons with other countries because, as he pointed out, like for the US can exceed its debt to GDP ratio kasi sila ay nag-iimprenta ng pera. They just keep printing the dollar and they will manage things. In the Philippines, we have to buy the dollar and our only saving grace are our OFWs who send us about $2 billion a month. Ang laki palang pera nun, ano? But the professor also pointed out, we need to be concerned about food security. Sabi nga ni ERAP, hungry stomach knows no rules, okay, or knows no laws. Ganyan po yung natatandaan ko during the Marcos regime na nung nagutom ang mga tao, ang daming namundok. Ayan, and even before Marcos. So we cannot have that situation where poverty drives people into rebellion. So let's go for a quick break. When we return, puntahan naman natin ang aking mga best friends dyan sa Rizal Medical Center. Okay, here on Agenda. Welcome back to the program agenda. I'm your host, Cito Beltran. Thank you for joining us today. And now let's bring in our next guest. She is the chairperson, Family and Community Medicine Specialist of Rizal Medical Center, none other than Dr. Tricia Guison-Bautista. Dr. Tricia, good morning.
Good morning. Magandang umaga po sa inyong mga nanonood at nakikinig.
Okay, makibalita lang kami, Doc Tricia, because I know that during the COVID period, talagang halos wala na kayong galawan dyan sa RMC and most people were saying, nako, COVID center na yung RMC. But now that we have gone to alert level 1, makibalita lang kami, have things normalized and how has RMC transitioned?
Correct. You're correct, sir. We were jam-packed during the COVID season. It's still a pandemic, but things are better now. When we say better and things have changed, before we used to have this big tent and we call that the influenza-like illness tent where everyone who feels may trangkaso pupunta doon. We have shut down that tent because konti na lang yung mga dumarating na may ganong concerns.
Mhm.
And before our outpatient department, we had very limited patients. No? Kailangan talaga dumaan muna lahat sa teleconsultation.
Yeah.
But now we have opened it up. Actually, early on pa in the pandemic, we were open, but now we are more open. And ang surge ngayon is now yung mga non-COVID cases. Ito yung mga 2 taong inipon na sakit. And so the consultation is not just one illness ng isang tao. Yung naipon nga niyang sakit na napabayaan in a sense, no? Yun yung making up the consultations. But it's better because all the departments have teleconsultation services also. So merong clinic na virtual, may clinic na in-person. And that somehow helps in addressing all of the patients. All the services are technically back to normal. Even our wards, the beds used to be really assigned to COVID, mga 50% or even more. Now we are opening up those beds for the cases na hindi nga natin na address before. But of course, we're always on the standby mode. Always abangan ng mga susunod na kabanata.
Okay, matanong ko lang, Doc Tricia, okay, ano yung mga top hits, ika nga nila, dinadako na lang sa biro, no? Top hits na mga sakit na biglang nagdatingan because I was worried for a while when we went into alert level 1. I heard of a few cases of dengue. Sabi ko, anak ng ewan, eto na naman tayo from COVID, magiging dengue. But nagtuloy-tuloy ba yung concern for a dengue outbreak or wala naman?
Well, dengue hindi pa naman po yung talagang dagsa katulad ng mga previous years.
Mm-hmm.
But it has remained to be actually an all year round problem. Pero not like mga before. So nakikisama naman siya. But I think yung mga dumating ngayon are what we call the non-communicable diseases. Yung mga napabayaang high blood, mga napabayaang diabetes, mga nagkaroon ng mga komplikasyon ng diabetes especially, no, yung tinamaan na yung kidneys nila, tinamaan ng stroke. And of course, while cancer has always been hindi namin to deprive ng care, no, the cancer, but there are many patients who postponed seeking consultation. And so kung sana na napatingnan ito ng mas maaga, baka naging maaga yung detection and of course the treatment as well. So yun po, kadalasan complications of what they used to have, a pre-existing illness. And I think this is really what is yung parang setback din talaga nung pandemic because we were really concentrating on COVID.
Okay, what about in terms of staffing? Because I know that the men and women of Rizal Medical Center, whether they're doctors, nurses, or even the technical team, talagang backs against the wall kayo, wala nang oras-oras, and I know of a few doctors na talagang uuwi na patampatana. Have you managed to recover as a team, and nabalik na ba yung staffing levels ng RMC? Because I heard na meron ding mga umalis or mga talaga sumurrender na at hindi na nila kaya.
You're correct, sir. No, the good thing is, I think the energy has always been there. Majority still are really fighting, and we're really on their heels, toes, and heels. Lahat ng pwedeng gawin nila, no, gagawin talaga nila.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, some nag-burn out. Now that's a reality, and the hospital continues to provide the support that's needed. No, I think it's not only in Rizal Medical Center. In many of the health facilities, marami pong mga nagkaroon ng, of course, mga mental health issues, emotional issues, as I said, burnout, fatigue. No? And that's why DOH started providing all the psychosocial support needed for our healthcare workers. Now, but life goes on. I think what's important is that the administration provides the support as well.
Mm-hmm.
And if a healthcare worker needs a break, we give that. Hindi na po masyadong yung parang dekahon kami na kailangan dito, pasok ka. Of course, may ganon.
Mm-hmm.
But we are also now more flexible, humanitarian, and the approach is more individualized and personalized. But in a sense, slowly bumabalik na rin yung mga nag-a-apply po ng mga healthcare workers. For a time being, maraming natakot maging healthcare worker, and that's why medyo atras muna sila. And even sa pag-apply ng college courses, no, pag tinanong mo sila, medyo natakot din yung ibang gustong maging allied health professional or medicine or nursing kasi nga nakita nila yung pagod. But now that it's easing up, I think nai-inspire din sila, no, because walang katapusan yung energy, yung energy ng mga healthcare workers.
Okay, now as far as alam mo, Doc, medyo very few people really manage to discover Rizal Medical Center, and may mga nagsasabi nga na meron palang mga private rooms ang RMC, etc. Could you just give our viewers an idea? Because ladies and gentlemen, I will not endorse a facility that I have not either availed the services of or had the experience or are familiar or am familiar with. And yung RMC po, ako talagang ayaw lang akong payagan tumambay dyan eh. Pero love ko yung RMC. So Doc, if you would, could you just familiarize our viewers regarding the services and particularly yung mga rooms? Kasi nasusurprise mga kaibigan ko pag sinabi ko, pwede ba? Pag ako na hospital, dyan ako mag-check-in.
Thank you, sir. No, I really love that you are considering RMC as one of your favorite hospitals. You know, honestly, I've been in RMC since 2007, and I myself have seen how it has grown and how it has really leveled up, especially with not just the infrastructure, but also with the services. And even the know-how of the people have also been upgraded. Yes, our rooms are now refurbished kasi nga po it underwent renovation. And thanks also to DOH that has been also their mandate to upgrade the facility. Slowly, it has not completely been renovated, pero by phases po ito. And maybe you have seen some of those rooms that we allot also for private cases. Now, we are not discriminatory. The care that we provide for all Filipinos, whether you are private or not, I mean private in the sense of as a client, remains to be, top-notch. That is now the mandate also of the hospital to provide excellent care. And because there are some rehabilitation happening, not just, as I said, no, in the infrastructure, but also in the systems. We are also now undergoing the performance governance system, which in a sense gave us direction where RMC should go. So all the services, meron po kaming tinatawag na SONOD, no? SONOD, meaning these would be the forte areas of the hospital. Surgery is one, that's the S, no? So the capacity to provide surgical services is being expanded. O would be ophthalmology. So kung meron po kayong mga patitingnan sa mata, yan po isa sa mga expertise ng aming ospital. N is neuroscience. So neuroscience, everything that has to do with the brain. So we even have a sleep laboratory. Not many hospitals have that. Mostly are private hospitals. But if you have sleep problems and you would want
yung mga may sleep apnea.
Opo, yung mga ganon. We have a laboratory for this one. And as I said, no, kakaunti lang po ang may ganito. Next is oncology, so cancer care. So malawak na rin po ang serbisyo namin for cancer. We also have radiotherapy. No, hindi rin po lahat ng DOH hospitals would have this, or even public hospitals. And the D is dermatology. So maraming may gusto rin dito. Of course, this is not just for aesthetic purposes, but the dermatology here, this is now an Apex hospital, meaning po Rizal Medical Center is preparing for the universal health care. That's why it is now being built as a referral center. So meaning, yung mga nanggagaling sa mga primary facilities, then hindi ma-handle, pupunta sa secondary, kasi hindi na kaya ng secondary facility, which are usually district hospitals, or maybe a LGU-run facility, no, hospital. Tatakbo na po yan sa RMC para hindi na siya kailangan pumunta pa ng yung mga masyadong high-end. Yun talagang it will now be more accessible, and the quality of care is at par with what is being given even in private hospitals. So wag po kayong matakot. You are all welcome to come and see for yourselves, no, what RMC has become now. It is clean. Yan ang gusto ko rin sabihin, no? Malinis, mabango, and very attractive. But more than anything, the services, as I said, will not disappoint you.
Yeah. Well, Doc Tricia, I remember when in the earlier days, I remember discovering na yung mga doktor sa mga private, yung mga big hospitals, consultants din pala dyan sa Rizal Medical. Sabi ko, ba't pa ako pupunta doon? Ang mahal ng parking doon. Pagkatas ang mahal ng consultation. Dito na ako sa RMC. Does that remain to be true that a number of your consultants or doctors are still connected with other big hospitals or came from the big hospitals?
You are very correct, sir. I myself, I am from the University of Santo Tomas Hospital, and I am still affiliated in that hospital. Many of us actually come from those private hospitals. So we are bringing in a mix of the services, in a sense, the expertise of those hospitals. No? So, wag kayong matakot po. No? Galing din po kami sa iba-ibang mga high-end, hindi man high-end, pero at least the private hospitals.
Yeah, well, I mean, the physicians and nurses at RMC are high-end. Ika nga, hindi expensive but high-end quality. Kita mo naman yung promo ko sa inyo. Kasi lab ko kayong lahat. Pero alam mo, may nakalimutan ka na pinagkulitan ko magkaroon dyan sa RMC. Yung sa cardio ba? Yung cath lab ba? Tawag nyo doon? Paki-explain na nga yun, Dr. Tricia.
Okay po, cath lab. So, that's something for those na nagkaroon ng heart attack tapos hindi mo kunyari kailangan ng ino-open up ka yung tinatawag nating coronary artery bypass. So parang hihiwain ka. Ito is less invasive, meaning meron lang ipapasok, no, sa dito sa singit mo para marating yung sa puso at no need really to cut you up. And that will free up yung blockage po sa heart, no? And dati, heart center lang ang merong ganito, no? Kasi heart center nga yun eh. But now, kami lang din so far, if I'm not mistaken yata, hindi naman siguro, ayoko masabing kami lang. Pero we have already this service and of course, it is not only accessible but it is affordable because PhilHealth will also be there as a partner in financial protection. So care is no longer out of reach. Okay, the care that we need is no longer out of reach. It is now available and we can all take advantage of all of this so that we can enjoy life. Hindi na yung titiisin po yung sakit at hindi na yung pag-iipunan pa ng husto dahil meron na nga po tayong mga services that's available and also affordable. So,
paano nyo minamanage ni Director Lumagi, ni Doc Rica, yung traffic ninyo dyan? Kasi the general impression of why people don't go to public hospitals or government hospitals is because, naku, Cito, pag pumunta kami dyan, pila hanggang kabilang barangay ang pila. But in Rizal Medical, I have not seen that. I've seen that in PGH. I've seen that in other government hospitals. How is it that you managed not to have that problem?
Well, we cannot always guarantee there's no traffic, sir. But
yung pila ba ng tao?
Traffic,
Kasi
yes.
nakita ko yun sa NKTI, nakita ko yun sa iba pa.
Opo. What the pandemic also taught us is the appointment system. So the appointment system became an efficient way of managing the human traffic. So you can always reach us in our website and our official social media page, where you will see the different pages to lodge an appointment so that on your day of appointment, you don't have to fall in line. So yun po, I think, yung isang mechanism that made it more comfortable for everyone because we also want to ensure that the health protocols are in place and comply with.
Okay, so ayan mga kaibigan, straight from Dr. Tricia Guison-Bautista, the level of care is high-end. The facilities are not only clean but smell clean.
Yes.
Mabango and an array of sonod services, sabi mo nga, no? So anyway, thank you very much, Doc Tricia, and my regards to Director Rica and the entire crew there in RMC. Congratulations for keeping the ship tip-top shape.
Maraming salamat, Sir Cito. It has been a privilege.
Okay. Yan po si Dr. Tricia Guison-Bautista, Chairperson Family and Community Medicine for Rizal Medical Center. The time is 8:59 and now let's go to our blessing for the week. And our blessing for the week comes from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28, verse 13. And the Lord will make you the head, not the tail. And you shall only go up and not down, if you obey the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you today, being careful to do them. Ayan po, maging masunurin tayo sa turo at mga kautusan ng Panginoon because I know that the Lord will bless you. I pray that the Lord will bless you and I say, God bless you. Have a great week ahead of you. Thank you for joining us here in Agenda. Please keep it here on One News PH.